everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
The apocalypse begins in the Marvel Universe. Chapter 206 to 218, Chapter 205, A Hidden Ally. 794 words. Under Captain America's unparalleled reputation and moral authority, the Superhuman Registration Act, which once sparked fierce resistance, was pushed through with almost no opposition. By reframing registration as joining Captain America's personal command, the law no longer felt like a threat to freedom. Superheroes no longer feared their identities being misused by the government. Public support surged. Everyone trusted that any team led by Captain America would act with justice. Even the most rebellious vigilante could not deny that Steve Rogers was the only man worthy of holding such power. Under his leadership, registered heroes quickly replaced the government military in handling riots and unrest across the country. Miraculously, they minimized casualties on both sides, and the public viewed their interventions far more favorably than those of the armed forces. Media sentiment swung decisively behind Captain America. Each successful operation only strengthened that momentum. Then came their greatest achievement, a mission deemed impossible. They subdued the rampaging Hulk and brought him safely back to the United States. No one knew how they did it. Even the heroes present swore they had done nothing, they had merely watched Captain America walk up to the enraged Hulk, and watched Hulk collapse, reverting into Bruce Banner. This mystery was too great for Tony Stark to ignore. As the newly appointed Secretary of Defense, Tony headed to the White House seeking answers. He and Steve often disagreed politically, but cooperation between them had remained solid, thanks to Marcus's prior instructions urging Tony to avoid direct confrontation with Steve wherever possible. Without Marcus's influence, Tony would never have tolerated Steve's idealistic policy decisions. Tony pushed open the door to the Oval Office and saw an unusual sight. Captain America buried in paperwork. Not training. Not leading troops. Just drowning in administrative chaos like any other overworked bureaucrat. "Hey, Tony," Steve groaned without looking up. "Don't tell me you're here to dump another stack of reports on me. As you can see, I'm already buried alive." He spread his hands helplessly. He simply wasn't suited for this work. Even with only 4 hours of sleep a day, he could barely keep up with the endless demands of Congress and the federal departments. Tony held up a bottle of red wine. "Relax. I'm not here for paperwork. I'm here to talk." "Oh, thank God." Steve leaned back with visible relief. He pressed the intercom. "I need privacy for an important discussion with the Secretary of Defense. Hold all calls and meeting requests until I say otherwise." "Thank you." His secretary's panicked voice crackled through the speaker. "But Mr. President, you already have over 10 urgent." "I'll handle them later," Steve cut in, and ended the call without hesitation. He exhaled heavily. "If you're not busy, Tony. I'd prefer this talk to last a while." Tony smirked. "When am I ever not efficient? My workload for today is already done." Steve shot a longing look at the mountainous pile of documents on his desk. "For once, I'm genuinely jealous." He rubbed his temples. "Congress has rejected nearly everything I propose. The only thing I've managed to get passed is the Registration Act, and that was your draft. Everything else is revise and resubmit. I can't keep this up." Tony understood. Becoming president didn't erase Steve's conflict with Congress, it inflamed it. But Tony wasn't here to discuss politics. "All right, Steve. I'm not here for your therapy session." He leaned forward. "I want to talk about the Hulk." "Hulk?" Steve blinked, confused. "What did he do now?" "Nothing. He's resting peacefully." Tony's voice lowered. "I want to know how you calmed him." "He wasn't in a punch him until he knocks out mood." "What exactly did you do?" Steve's expression shifted instantly. The discomfort was obvious. After several seconds of hesitation, he finally admitted. You're right. I didn't do it alone. Someone helped me. But he doesn't want his identity known. Not even to me. Tony pressed. I swore I wouldn't reveal it. Tony froze. This wasn't a small secret. Someone powerful enough to pacify the Hulk was aiding Steve in the shadows, and was hiding deliberately. Fine, Tony said, standing up. If you won't tell me, I'll find out myself. That doesn't violate your oath, does it? Tony, you don't understand, Steve warned. If people find out he's still alive, it'll cause a massive crisis. That only confirmed Tony's suspicions. This mysterious ally wasn't some new hero. It was someone presumed dead. Someone dangerous. But Tony Stark was Tony Stark. Warnings only fueled his curiosity. He said nothing more, turned, and headed out. He had learned enough. If the answer wasn't with Steve, then he would go directly to the other witness. Bruce Banner. Tony slid into his car and drove straight toward the military hospital where Banner was recovering. Chapter 207, Chapter 206, An Unexpected Return. 877 words. When Tony arrived at the military hospital where Banner was being held, he immediately spotted an unexpected figure standing near the entrance of the ward. It was an elderly officer, white-haired but still sharp-eyed, his uniform immaculate and decorated with multiple medals. He was peering quietly through the doorway at the unconscious Bruce Banner. General Ross. I thought you were dead. Indeed, this was General Thaddeus Ross, the commander of the U.S. military's specialized anti-superhuman unit. He had been kidnapped during the breakout incident on the Raft prison by the Abomination. After disappearing for so long, the military had almost certainly listed him as deceased. Yet here he was, alive, silent, observing Banner from the hallway. Emil didn't kill me, Ross replied coolly, as though recounting someone else's misfortune. He said that would be too merciful. He lifted his hand for Tony to see, his palm covered in dense needle marks. So he did to me what had once been done to him. Said it was the only way I'd understand his suffering. There was only one thing the Abomination could have meant, exposure to the same gamma radiation that had transformed Bruce Banner into the Hulk. Only a monster wants another to understand a monster's pain. Turning Ross into something like himself had been the first half of Abomination's revenge. Killing him afterward would have been the second half. But Emil Blonsky never got the chance to finish that plan. Tony's eyes narrowed. So, are you still planning to capture Banner? Ross shook his head. No. I understand him now. You can't blame him entirely for what happened. Then, as though shedding his past, he pulled the medals from his chest and tossed them into a nearby trash bin. And in any case, I'm no longer a U.S. officer. Glad to be working alongside you now. As for the rest, I can't say more. Tony watched him walk away, more confused than enlightened. Since when did resigning from the military make Ross his colleague? And had he truly come here only to check on Banner? Forget it. Let Marcus worry about this, Tony muttered and stepped into the room, shaking Banner awake without ceremony. Hey, big guy. Get up. I'm not here to watch you nap. Banner jolted upright in panic, then exhaled when he realized who it was. Tony, you scared me half to death. I finally turned back to normal, couldn't you let me sleep a bit longer? What, should I sing you a lullaby? Please, Tony. I'm not in the mood. If you woke up one day and found you'd destroyed several cities and left millions homeless, how would you feel? Tony tapped his chin theatrically. I guess that kind of property damage would cost what, 0.01 something% of Stark Industries' assets. Banner gave him an exhausted look. Tony sighed and softened his tone. All right. I'm here because I want to know how you turned back into yourself. We need a way to stop you next time. Banner frowned, trying to recall. I only remember that after Captain America appeared, I started hearing a lullaby. Somehow it reached me even when I was completely consumed. A lullaby? At your rage level, that shouldn't do anything. Not nothing, but it can't be the main factor. Tony leaned forward. There must have been something else, something keeping your aggression suppressed. Don't tell me someone beat it out of you. No one attacked me. Banner shook his head. But at that moment, I felt something, like a mind inside my mind. A force helping me control the rage, and weaken the Hulk's hold. I don't know what it was, but I'm certain that is what allowed me to change back. Banner's answer resolved little, but it confirmed one thing: someone with powerful psychic abilities had intervened. Tony left the hospital shortly after, returning to his office to contact Marcus. You're telling me, Marcus said after hearing the full explanation, that Banner was brought back by one of Captain America's secret allies, and no one knows who he is. Exactly. Annoying guy, whoever he is. Tony swirled a glass of whiskey. He knew Marcus well, this would be more than enough information for him. A psychic, then, Marcus concluded. Someone who can bolster another person's willpower. Someone the world believes dead, someone absolutely loyal to Captain America. That rules out all the supervillains. Marcus paused, and a specific movie post-credits scene came to mind. Tony, search U.S. birth records for anyone with the surname Xavier, specifically twins. There won't be many. If one of them is, or was, in a vegetative state, that's your man. With my clearance. Easy. Tony smirked. I'll have Jarvis run it immediately. Also, I ran into General Ross. Turns out the old man isn't dead. He recounted the entire conversation. Marcus chuckled. What else could it be? Someone blasted with gamma radiation only has one likely outcome. Statistically. Death, Tony corrected. Hulk and Abomination are extreme outliers. If gamma exposure worked like that for everyone, Earth would look like Krypton by now. Tony was absolutely correct in scientific terms. But unfortunately, the man exposed this time wasn't an ordinary person from this universe. He was someone who, in the original comics, had already undergone his own transformation. Another giant was about to be born. Chapter 208, Chapter 207, The Phoenix Society. 851 words. Captain America's greatest power has never been his peak human physique, nor even the vibranium shield in his hand. His true strength lies in the extraordinary influence he carries as a symbol, an influence that draws powerful allies to his side as naturally as breathing. Unlike most superheroes who prefer operating alone, Captain America is never truly alone. Across all three Captain America films, he is constantly supported by elite companions. In the first film, Bucky Barnes. In the second, Black Widow and Falcon. In the third, half the Avengers themselves. Captain America continually gains allies of exceptional power. Now, even more formidable individuals had gathered around him, forming a group whose combined strength easily surpassed the entire human coalition of the Battle of New York. A single Hulk could pose a threat to the entire planet, and yet Hulk willingly followed him. But none of them had noticed where the real threat now stood. 3 days later. During the next 3 days, the X-Men focused on rebuilding their devastated academy. Thanks to Magneto's control over metal, the structural frame of the mansion had been restored, though many details remained unfinished. Anyone could still see at a glance that the building had been subjected to heavy bombardment. The wreckage of the downed helicarrier was hauled into the underground base for study. To their surprise, the interior contained no bodies whatsoever. Every system, weaponry, navigation, targeting, defense, had been operated entirely by AI. There were no clues to interrogate. Only twisted metal. But the shield insignia was unmistakable. To the X-Men, this was clear. The attack had been authorized by the U.S. government. It was essentially a declaration of war. No mutant in America would join Captain America's Registration Act after that. They still believed in him personally, but not the government operating behind him. Negotiations would have to happen. And those talks would decide the fate of both humans and mutants. While the X-Men prepared for diplomatic talks with the new administration, Marcus, recently accepted into the academy, had spent those same days reshaping the students' minds. It began harmlessly, a memorial service honoring the classmates who died resisting the attackers. Cyclops, still too young and inexperienced, failed to see the danger. Then came the second step. A voluntary, combat training program where Marcus personally instructed students on how to use their abilities against human forces. In essence, military training. He even recruited Kitty Pryde as an instructor. His popularity soared. Soon, Marcus established a special organization. The Phoenix Society. Publicly, it was a mutual support group for mutants to help each other improve their abilities. In reality, it was an organization dedicated to preparing for war against humanity. Within 3 days, more than 2/3 of the student body joined. The helicarrier attack had done its work. Marcus had successfully shown them that humans viewed mutants as enemies. If we do not resist, we will be enslaved. The slogan ignited fierce pride. Students flocked to Marcus's side, preparing for a future where war was inevitable. By the time Cyclops realized how bad things had become and tried to disband the Phoenix Society, it was far too late. The organization already existed in spirit, even without its name. Xavier's old ideal, peaceful coexistence, looked like a naive fantasy when faced with real artillery fire. If only one side desired peace, then peace could only be achieved after victory. After finishing a secret Phoenix Society training session and dismissing the students, Marcus bid farewell to Kitty Pryde and headed down the corridor. Suddenly he stopped, smiling slightly. How many times is this now? Taking someone else's form just to observe me. The student behind him froze, then gave a faint, bitter smile. When did you notice? His body rippled. Skin and clothing peeled and shifted like layers of scales. Moments later, he had transformed into a curvaceous blonde woman, the hallmark power of a shapeshifter. It was Mystique, Raven Darkholme. Her raw combat strength was modest, but her role throughout the X-Men's history was pivotal. You don't want to meet me in your true form? Marcus asked casually. He knew the alluring woman before him was only one of her many disguises. Mystique's true form, a blue-skinned, scale-covered mutant, was impossible to mistake for human. At least, this is the form I prefer to use, Mystique replied quietly. And you know I can't reveal my real appearance here. My relationship with the X-Men is complicated. Marcus didn't push the subject. So then, why follow me? Even if we're both mutants, don't assume I'm as merciful as Magneto. I'm not here to harm you, Mystique said seriously. After watching him for days, she understood her powers were useless against him. Against someone whose entire body could turn into living metal, her shape-shifting offered no route to victory. I only want to know. She continued softly. Do you truly believe the attack was entirely orchestrated by the U.S. government? _________. T/N. For readers who would like early access, my Patreon is available for just $4 per month. You'll unlock advanced chapters and help support ongoing works. Link patreon.com/user?u=79514336. You may also search Translator Sama directly on Patreon. Your support is sincerely appreciated. Chapter 209, Chapter 208, On the Eve of Negotiations. 906 words. What exactly are you implying? Marcus asked, his gaze fixed on Mystique. Everyone knew the helicarrier belonged to S.H.I.E.L.D., and S.H.I.E.L.D. was an American government agency. Under normal circumstances, there was no question who had authorized the attack on the Xavier Institute. Mystique, however, voiced her doubt. Not a single human soldier appeared during the entire assault, she said. In fact, we didn't see any humans at all. A fully automated attack isn't impossible, but why use nothing but AI-controlled machines? What's the point of going that far? You don't need to worry about their logistics, Marcus replied, dismissing her concern with a wave. Whether it's manned or automated doesn't matter. What matters is that both the helicarrier and the Sentinel robots belong to the US government. So tell me, who else could have commanded them? If Marcus were being honest, the true answer was simple. He himself had commanded them. But of course, Mystique didn't need to know that. She shook her head. No. The main shield helicarrier vanished during the New York incident. With its nuclear-grade defenses, it's entirely possible it survived the blast. If the ship that attacked us was that missing helicarrier, then this situation becomes much more complicated. Marcus snorted. Fine. Then what about the Sentinels? Don't forget, those robots were created specifically to combat mutants. The government publicly swore they would never deploy them for anything else. Are you suggesting Hydra or AIM broke into Trask Industries just to steal thousands of Sentinels and what? Launch a surprise attack on mutants for fun? They're robots, Mystique said sternly. In theory, anyone with access could command them. Yes, they were designed to kill us, but that doesn't automatically mean the government is the one pulling the strings. Marcus narrowed his eyes. So your real point is, you suspect me. Otherwise you wouldn't be following me around. Mystique didn't deny it. The timing of your arrival. The things you've done since, they're too convenient. No one with sense would ignore that. And your conclusion? Marcus asked indifferently. I don't have proof, she admitted. Silence followed. A would-be detective trying to uncover the truth. A mastermind determined to hide his role. There wasn't much left to say. Marcus was the first to break the quiet. I thought you might choose to stand with us. A shame. Mystique shot back sharply. I'm not even sure which side I should be standing on. Suspicion, Marcus knew, meant little without evidence. Nick Fury had suspected him countless times, yet could do nothing. Mystique's doubts would amount to as much as dust. And soon, everything he'd prepared would come to fruition. One Mystique couldn't disrupt anything. Negotiations between the Avengers and the X-Men will begin soon, Marcus said as he stepped away. When the truth comes out, we'll see who stands where. Leaving those words behind, he exited the Phoenix Society's hidden training chamber. Just as Marcus predicted, Captain America would personally lead a delegation of registered heroes to the Xavier Institute. Cyclops, representing the X-Men, would confront them over the helicarrier strike. That meeting would determine everything. To ensure the outcome looked favorable, Captain America had already summoned Tony Stark to help draft a plausible explanation. There's nothing to explain, Tony said impatiently. Just tell them the truth. We lost a helicarrier during the New York incident. Hydra hijacked it. We had no idea they'd use it to attack the school. Steve wasn't convinced. Will they believe that? Magneto is with them now. If he decides he doesn't like what he hears, this meeting could go sideways fast. Then skip the talking, Tony joked. Send Hulk in and let him remodel the campus. Then, realizing he'd gone too far, he sighed and switched to a serious tone. Fine, fine. Ask them to return the helicarrier wreckage. If HYDRA really hacked the system, the onboard data logs will show it. Once we have that evidence, we can clear ourselves. Steve nodded. Recovering a pile of scrap shouldn't be hard. And to show sincerity, we can let one of their scientists inspect the data with you. It'll look like a goodwill gesture. With the main plan set, Tony pushed further. And let me guess, you want the X-Men to join the Registration Act and become part of the reformed Avengers? Of course, Steve said earnestly. If we want a strong, unified team protecting America, mutants would be invaluable. The Avengers, though stripped of S.H.I.E.L.D., still existed, now serving directly under the president. Steve rubbed his temples in frustration. Negotiations. I never had to deal with any of this before I became president. Well, that's what happens when every word you say now represents the entire US government, Tony reminded him. The rift between humans and mutants has lasted for decades. You can't fix it with a handshake. But Steve remained optimistic. Then let this be the generation where the rift ends. I finally have the authority to try. Tony forced a smile. Of course, Mr. President. But inside, Tony knew better. This meeting wouldn't be smooth. The Avengers and X-Men wouldn't merge into one family just because Steve wanted it. After all, Marcus's plans had nothing to do with peace. __________. T/N. For readers who would like early access, my Patreon is available for just $4 per month. You'll unlock 140+ advanced chapters and help support ongoing works. Link patreon.com/user?u=79514336. You may also search Translator Sama directly on Patreon. Your support is sincerely appreciated. Chapter 210, Chapter 209, The Negotiations Begin. 878 words. On the day the Avengers met the X-Men for formal negotiations, Captain America traveled toward the Xavier Institute, at the head of an entire U.S. Army infantry division. Soldiers marched fully armed, tanks and attack helicopters escorted the convoy with thunderous force. It looked less like a diplomatic mission and more like a military deployment. We don't need all of this, Captain America muttered inside the presidential Cadillac, frowning as he looked out the window. To him, this show of power was unnecessary. All they needed to do was clarify that the government had not ordered the earlier assault. How difficult could that be? General Ross, seated beside him, offered a dry reminder. Don't be careless, Captain. Today you're not having a casual conversation with Scott Summers. You're here as the representative of the entire United States, negotiating with a species. Ross then gestured toward the long motorcade behind them. And even if you think this is a simple matter, the diplomats don't. Without this level of military protection, you couldn't pay them enough to step foot in a place where Magneto is waiting. Right. Magneto. Steve murmured, staring ahead. I still believe Scott only lost his head for a moment. Soon we'll stand side by side again, fighting to end the divide between humans and mutants. Ross shrugged. For all our sakes, I hope so. When the ruins of the school finally came into view, its charred stone walls and shattered windows still bore the scars of the attack. Smoke no longer rose, but the memory hung heavy in the air. At the gate, rows of mutants, students and trainees, stood waiting for Captain America's arrival. But the expressions on their faces were not welcoming. Captain America stepped out of the vehicle and raised a hand, signaling the soldiers to remain behind. Only Ross and a small diplomatic team followed him into the courtyard. The first person to approach him was the one he least wanted to see. Magneto. Welcome, Captain, Magneto said with a polite smile, extending his hand. Steve did not take it. I was told this meeting was with the X-Men. Magneto withdrew his hand without offense. Of course. And I am one of them now. At those words, the young mutants erupted with excitement. The man who had single-handedly stopped an entire helicarrier and dismantled a robot army now stood openly at their side. His authority among them eclipsed even that of Cyclops. Cyclops hurried forward, attempting to salvage his own leadership. Captain, thank you for coming personally. We needed this discussion. But at the moment Magneto stepped back, the students' expressions turned cold. Their eyes hardened, directed not only at Captain America, but also at Cyclops himself. Cyclops felt humiliation rising in his throat. Never since becoming field leader had his authority been so undermined. Someone in the crowd muttered. What we need is not negotiations, it's an apology. More students nodded. Captain America frowned. Scott, the State Department has issued a preliminary statement, but let me swear to you personally, this helicarrier attack was not carried out under my orders. I believe you, Cyclops answered immediately, grateful to align himself once again with the captain he admired. But the students behind him disagreed. You've only been president for a short time, one said loudly. This could have been planned by the government long before you took office. Quiet. Cyclops snapped, whirling around. Magneto stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of the students. Scott, don't be authoritarian. This is a negotiation that concerns every mutant's future. Their voices deserve to be heard. You're calling me authoritarian. Cyclops' temper flared, but Captain America seized his arm, stopping him before he said something worse. Steve addressed the gathered mutants. This attack happened during my presidency, and I swear, if it were an official military operation, I would know. But such reassurance, spoken without evidence, satisfied no one. A different student challenged him. What if Congress hid it from you? Steve sighed. Time to use the contingency plan he and Tony had prepared. You may return the helicarrier wreckage to us, he said, and send one of your own scientists to examine the onboard systems alongside Tony Stark. The flight logs will clearly show who controlled it. The courtyard fell silent. Magneto and many of the senior mutants exchanged glances, admitting that the proposition did sound reasonable. But this was exactly the moment Marcus had prepared for. Just as the others began to nod, Kitty Pryde, warned in advance, stepped forward. Oh? Return it to you so you can destroy the evidence. Steve blinked. He hadn't expected such a hostile twist. No, he said hurriedly. Your scientist would serve as witness. Nothing would be altered. Right, a scientist. Kitty tilted her head and smiled thinly. Tell me, everyone, when you think of a mutant scientist, who comes to mind? Confused looks spread among the students. After a moment, one figure stepped forward. Thick hands. Blue fur. Glasses perched on a simian face. Hank McCoy, Beast. The most respected scientist among the X-Men. _________. T/N. For readers who would like early access, my Patreon is available for just $4 per month. You'll unlock 100+ advanced chapters and help support ongoing works. Link patreon.com/user?u=79514336. You may also search Translator Sama directly on Patreon. Your support is sincerely appreciated. Chapter 211, Chapter 210, Negotiations Collapse. 856 words. Beast knew perfectly well he would be chosen as the representative scientist for the mutant side. Thus he stepped forward proactively, though he had no idea what awaited him. Kitty Pryde took a deep breath, walked to a nearby table, and picked up a laptop. Her expression was solemn. Hank. I'll get straight to the point. She pulled up a document and turned the screen toward everyone. I'm sorry. I found this in the secret folder on your computer. I phased into your room to get it. You broke into my room. Beast frowned. Anyone else making such a claim he might not believe, but a girl who could literally walk through walls. No password, door, or lock in existence could stop her. But even then, he wasn't particularly alarmed. The secret folder contained only classified research data, and some embarrassing personal videos. Shameful, but hardly a matter for a public confrontation. Yet when he looked at the screen, his eyes nearly popped out. This is data extracted from the helicarrier's systems. As a scientific genius, Beast identified it instantly and froze in disbelief. I've spent days and only managed to decode a tiny portion. But this is the full dataset. Of course you didn't decode it, Kitty said sharply. She switched to another window, an email. Dear Hank. I deeply regret the decision Congress has made, Tony Stark. The courtyard exploded with murmurs. Of course. Captain America had just proposed sending Beast to work with Tony Stark. If Tony was the helicarrier AI designer, then working with Beast would give him complete control over the investigation. And now there was an email, from Tony himself, already in Hank's possession. Captain America's offer suddenly looked like a setup. Beast turned pale. Wait. I've never seen that email. I have no idea how it got onto my computer. Steve Rogers was equally stunned. None of this matched anything he or Tony had discussed. He quickly turned to General Ross. Contact Tony. Immediately. Find out what the hell he's doing. But Ross was already lowering his phone. Captain. Tony Stark is missing. None of our channels can reach him. Steve stiffened. Damn it, Tony. Whatever you're doing, you should have told me first. He still believed Tony had simply acted on his own again, rash, impulsive, unilateral. But this time, Tony's mistake was pushing Steve into a political disaster. Meanwhile, the mutant side had already compared the digital signatures. A mutant technician declared, "This data is unquestionably Stark Industries architecture." And the email originated from the Pentagon's Defense Department servers. There's no doubt, Congress authorized Stark to control the helicarrier. Hank McCoy was cooperating with him in advance. I was not. Beast roared. But the crowd was already beyond reason. And how did you break my encryption, Kitty? That's not your power. Kitty folded her arms. Oh, I had help. Someone warned me to check your files. If not for him, I never would have believed you'd betray us. The someone, of course, was Marcus, who had handed her the preset decryptor containing fabricated evidence. Beast had indeed never seen any of it because Marcus had placed it there himself. Had the crowd been calm, the inconsistencies would have surfaced immediately. But they were not calm. They were angry, frightened, and ready to blame someone. The shouting began. Traitor! It was the government all along. They sent Stark to wipe us out. Kill him. Marcus barely needed to steer them. A single spark among the agitated majority was enough to ignite the entire crowd. Cyclops, already losing control of the student body, felt the pressure. Even he wavered under the tidal wave of fury. He turned to Captain America. Captain, it seems we have our answer. Your Secretary of Defense directed the attack. Even if you were unaware, Congress cannot escape responsibility. Scott, no. Wait. Steve tried desperately to regain control. Don't jump to conclusions. Let us bring Tony back and question him. I swear we will give you a proper explanation. But the crowd was no longer listening. In their eyes, Captain America was no longer the hero of freedom. He was just another president, another enemy. Get out. You brought an army to intimidate us. You want war. We'll return it. We're done being afraid. The wave of hostility forced Cyclops into a corner. He had no choice but to embrace their sentiment, or lose them entirely. He turned back to Steve. A proper explanation. Tell me, Mr. President, do you even know what mutants need? He stepped forward, voice ringing across the courtyard. You're America's greatest hero. When the powerless suffer, you protect them. When injustice spreads, you stand up. That is what made you a legend. But when mutants were dragged into laboratories for experimentation, where were you? When we were hunted, hated, discriminated against, where were you? When soldiers massacred entire mutant communities, where were you? Steve had no answer. When the Superhero Registration Act threatened his peers, he had risen in rebellion. But when the Mutant Registration Act devastated mutant lives, he had not. Cyclops delivered the verdict. You have never stood with us. You are the hero of America's people. But we mutants were never included among them. Chapter 212, Chapter 211, X. 814 words. That wasn't something I could have solved alone. Captain America spoke with quiet frustration. He was not a mutant. What right or position did he have to lead a resistance against humanity on their behalf? Even as the symbolic leader of superheroes, he could not insert himself into the conflict between humans and mutants. Exactly. No matter which side you help, you become the villain to the other, so you choose to do nothing at all. Cyclops struck directly at Steve's greatest weakness. For the first time, he felt free of the towering shadow of Captain America's legend. From this moment forward, Scott Summers no longer believed any human would truly fight for mutant rights. Scott, I came here with a solution. You have to trust me. Steve still tried, desperately, to salvage the negotiations. But in an atmosphere this volatile, his words carried no weight. Then allow me, respectfully, to ask you to get out of my school. Cyclops' voice was cold, decisive. The students behind him erupted in cheers. Captain America felt the situation spiraling out of control. He stepped forward, trying to keep Scott from walking away, but to the already on-edge crowd, the gesture looked threatening. A fireball blasted forward. One of the young mutants, Pyro, had hurled it straight at Captain America. Steve reacted instantly, raising his shield to block the attack. For a frontline veteran of countless battles, such ambushes barely registered. But today he wasn't simply Steve Rogers, he was the President of the United States. And that changed everything. Protect the President. Two soldiers threw themselves in front of Steve and opened fire, sweeping the students with automatic weapons. Several were hit instantly, mutants without any defensive abilities, just as helpless as they had been under the Sentinel attack. Two exchanged attacks. And just like that, war erupted. The accompanying U.S. troops unleashed full firepower. Gunfire tore across the courtyard. Above them, the backup shield helicarrier descended, recently repurposed as the new Avengers headquarters on Tony Stark's suggestion. Unfortunately, its appearance only made things worse. To the mutants, the image was unmistakable. The government had brought the same kind of weapon that massacred their classmates. This was not diplomacy, this was invasion. Pent-up fury exploded. Mutants unleashed their powers like a rising tide. Energy blasts, fire, ice, lightning, the courtyard became a battlefield in seconds. Everyone stop. Steve bellowed. But gunfire drowned out his voice. Several soldiers tried to drag him back toward the armored limousine. He shoved them away. Get off me. I'm not the one who needs protection, they are. At that moment, Cyclops attacked. A blazing beam of ruby energy shot from his visor, aimed directly at Steve's head. It would knock him unconscious instantly, maybe kill him outright if unrestrained. But a figure stepped between them. General Thaddeus Ross. The beam struck him full force. His uniform vaporized in strips, revealing the muscular frame beneath. But his skin remained completely unscathed. Ross. Steve grabbed him in alarm, only to realize Ross was unharmed. Captain, this isn't something you fix by talking. Ross's voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. As always, you must decide which side you stand on. Unfortunately, today, neither side is fully right. This is our punishment for ignoring the mutant crisis for decades. Then he stepped forward. And transformed. His skin flushed red. Muscles ballooned monstrously. Within seconds, Ross became a towering behemoth, a Hulk-sized titan whose cold, expressionless face stood in stark contrast to Bruce Banner's savage rage. The Red Hulk had entered the battlefield. Cyclops roared and fired again, an even more intense blast. The sky turned crimson under its glow. Red Hulk walked straight through it. Unhindered. Uninjured. Growing stronger with every step. Thanks for the energy, he growled. Then swung a single massive palm, sending Cyclops flying like a ragdoll. Unlike the Green Hulk, whose strength rises with anger, Ross in his Red Hulk form absorbed energy, radiation, cosmic waves, lasers, anything of that nature. Cyclops' optic blasts were practically fuel to him. Empowered, Red Hulk surged into the mutant ranks. Bullets bounced off him. Energy attacks only fed him more power. Every punch, carrying over 100 tons of force, generated shockwaves that shattered walls. Any mutant hit directly was obliterated. The battlefield turned blood red under his rampage. And despite this overwhelming advantage, Steve Rogers felt no triumph. Only despair. Why? Why did it come to this? I only wanted to talk. He muttered to himself, helplessly watching the massacre unfold. Gunfire roared. Explosions tore through the academy grounds. The scent of blood filled the air. This was no longer a conflict that could be halted with a single order. The moment the first body fell, restraint vanished. Now there was only one possible ending. One side survives. The other doesn't. ___________. T/N. For readers who would like early access, my Patreon is available for just $4 per month. You'll unlock 90+ advanced chapters and help support ongoing works. Link patreon.com/user?u=79514336. You may also search Translator Sama directly on Patreon. Your support is sincerely appreciated. Chapter 213, Chapter 212, The Hulk Returns. 806 words. Captain America still could not decide what action he should take. And at that moment, a familiar figure stepped quietly beside him. Marcus. He had been hidden among the mutant students this entire time, and Steve had not even noticed. Marcus, why are you here? Ever since Marcus had pushed him toward becoming president, Steve had heard nothing from him. He never imagined their next meeting would be on a battlefield soaked in blood. I'm choosing my side, Marcus answered simply. Then, without warning, his arm morphed into a gleaming silver blade. He swung. Sparks exploded as metal struck vibranium. Captain America staggered back in shock, though he immediately sensed Marcus had deliberately aimed only for his shield, never his body. He raised a hand to stop the soldiers rushing to his defense. Marcus, what are you doing? You forgot, Captain, Marcus said, stepping forward again. The blade came down hard, once more on the shield. I'm a mutant too. But we're friends. We fought side by side, don't you remember? Steve's voice carried real pain. He hated the thought of raising a weapon against someone he had once trusted. But Marcus pressed the attack relentlessly, forcing Steve to defend himself by instinct alone. Sometimes, Marcus said softly, identity determines our stance. And stance is often more important than friendship. Or even justice. His words hit harder than his strikes. Finally, under pressure, Steve reacted. His shield whipped out and struck Marcus's shoulder, halting the assault. Marcus smiled faintly. His arm returned to its human form. That's right, Captain. You finally understand your role. He stepped aside. Now look. Look at what the side fighting for you is facing. Steve turned and saw the battle properly for the first time. Red Hulk versus Magneto. What had once been Red Hulk's unstoppable rampage was now a losing struggle. Steel restraints, twisted into brutal chains, wrapped around his enormous frame. Magneto's power forced them tighter and tighter, crushing even Red Hulk's hardened flesh. No matter how he strained, the metal bindings did not so much as tremble. The American military fared no better. Storm soared into the sky, lightning spiraling around her. Bolts as thick as serpents crashed down, vaporizing tanks like brittle toys. Bullets fired at her simply froze midair, suspended inches away. Jean Grey had awakened. Her telekinesis, pushed beyond its previous limits, held back storms of bullets effortlessly. With a mere thought, she could crumple tanks like paper. Her power was growing dangerously close to that of the Black Phoenix. Kitty Pryde moved through the battlefield like a phantom. Bullets passed harmlessly through her as she walked through walls, soldiers, and armor plating. The troops watched in horror as she phased her hand into their chests, solidifying only long enough to tear into nerves and organs before they collapsed unconscious. New Avengers recruits, Nova, Iron Fist, Wasp, and others, remained aboard the helicarrier awaiting orders. Many had fought alongside the X-Men in the past. Now, like Steve, they hesitated. Were they about to raise their hands against former allies? A dazed officer stumbled up to Captain America. "Mr. President. It's too dangerous, you must withdraw immediately." "I'm not going anywhere." Steve didn't think, he simply refused, as he always had when someone told him to run. Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's the right choice, Captain. You know what will happen if the mutants win. America will descend into chaos, and everything you've worked for as president will crumble." "Marcus. No excuses." Marcus suddenly kicked him backward with brutal precision, sending Steve tumbling across the ground. When Steve rose again, Marcus had already vanished. Steve stared down at his fallen shield. The star-spangled emblem stared back at him, a symbol of the country he now carried on his shoulders. He lifted it slowly, then inhaled once, and shouted the words Marcus had been waiting for. "Avengers, assemble." The helicarrier shook as every waiting hero launched into action. Bruce Banner was the first to leap. He didn't even wait to transform. He simply hurled himself from the sky. No parachute, no hesitation. Plummeting toward the academy grounds like a meteor. He hit the ground with an earth-shattering boom, carving a crater into the courtyard. Dust erupted everywhere. And then, a colossal green figure rose from the pit. To the mutants it felt like the arrival of a demon. Hulk. Smash. The roar shattered the surrounding windows. Even the bravest mutants froze with instinctive dread. Because they all knew. The Avengers' strongest weapon, their ultimate force of destruction, had entered the battlefield. And once the Hulk was fully enraged, no one on Earth could stop him. _____. Party Popper shout out to WS and James Murphy. Party Popper. A huge thank you to WS and James Murphy for joining my Patreon and supporting the journey. Your support means a lot and helps keep the chapters coming faster. Welcome to the VIP Club. Raising Hands Sparkles. Chapter 214, Chapter 213, Two Hulks vs. Magneto. 728 words. The instant the Hulk appeared, he charged straight toward Magneto, the mutant who alone was restraining both Red Hulk and the U.S. military forces. A mountain-sized green fist came crashing down toward Magneto's aged but unyielding face. Before the blow could land, countless shards of metal whirled together in front of Magneto, forming a massive improvised shield. Hulk's punch hit. The impact warped the newly formed steel wall instantly, its surface groaning, as if on the verge of vaporizing. But Magneto's magnetic force held every molecule in place. With a final surge of power, he redirected the force and sent the Hulk hurtling backwards. The monster's multi-ton body slammed into the ground, carving yet another crater into the battlefield. But only seconds later, Hulk rose, covered in dust but unharmed. His fury swelled. And with it, his strength. "Hulk! Crush you!" Even the wind pushed aside by his voice felt like a storm. Magneto narrowed his eyes. Since Wolverine, he had not seen another creature with such absurd durability. "I'm curious," he said coldly, "to see how much punishment you can withstand." He raised his hands. Thousands, no, tens of thousands, of metal fragments ripped from the battlefield, converging into a metallic meteor storm. Every shard shot toward the Hulk. They crashed against him, bending and flattening against muscles as dense as armor. Even if they could not pierce him, the sheer mass, hundreds of tons, wrapped around Hulk layer by layer. In moments, he was sealed inside a massive sphere of scrap metal rolling helplessly across the ground. Given Magneto's level of magnetic control, even a supermonster like the Hulk would not break free quickly. But Magneto's focus on the green behemoth gave the other Hulk an opportunity. The moment Magneto's attention shifted, the metal shackles binding Red Hulk loosened, only slightly. But slightly was enough. He flexed, and the enchanted restraints shattered like dried twigs, collapsing into dust at his feet. Unlike the Green Hulk, Red Hulk acted with a soldier's clarity. He knew he wasn't yet strong enough to face Magneto. But the battlefield offered him a chance to change that. He sprinted out of the Academy courtyard and activated his communicator. Avengers Command, drop the destroyer armor. Now. The crew aboard the helicarrier froze. General Ross, we can't do that. The destroyer isn't under our authorization. If something goes wrong. The destroyer, Odin's god-forged armor, was one of the most powerful artifacts to ever fall into S.H.I.E.L.D.'s hands. Its remains had yielded devastating weapon prototypes, including the BFG cannon Marcus once used in Sokovia. This was not something anyone would casually hand over. But then. Do it. Captain America's voice cut in. That's a direct order. Understood. With presidential authority backing it, the crew obeyed immediately. The half-ruined silver armor was dropped from the sky, no parachute, no caution, falling like a meteor. Red Hulk leapt forward, catching the massive armor before it could crash. The destroyer still bore the scars of its battle with Thor, but its core remained intact. A shining orange sphere of terrifying Asgardian energy. Without hesitation. Crack! Red Hulk smashed open the armor's chest and ripped the core free. Then he crushed it in his fist. Blinding light burst out. And Red Hulk devoured every bit of the radiation. The earth trembled. His muscles swelled violently. Red light flooded across his skin, boiling like magma under flesh. The soldiers aboard the helicarrier trembled. The loss of the destroyer was nothing compared to the terror now standing on the battlefield. He charged back toward the academy, every footstep leaving a crater. No bullet touched him. No fire or lightning slowed him. He reached the massive scrap metal sphere imprisoning the Green Hulk. Lifted it with one hand, fingers sinking into solid steel. And raised it overhead like a trophy, pointing directly at Magneto. Magneto floated upward, eyes narrowing at the challenge. So the master of magnetism said with icy disdain. Your brain must have melted if you think metal will help you fight me. The two Hulks, one wrapped in metal, one burning like a star, now faced the greatest mutant of them all. A clash on this scale could tear the entire academy to rubble. __________. T/N. For readers who would like early access, my Patreon is available for just $4 per month. You'll unlock 100+ advanced chapters and help support ongoing works. Link patreon.com/user?u=79514336. You may also search Translator Sama directly on Patreon. Your support is sincerely appreciated. Chapter 215, Chapter 214, The One Who Returned. 838 words. Red Hulk raised the massive iron sphere, dozens of tons in weight and denser than any metal known on Earth, with a single hand. He spun it overhead like a gigantic meteor hammer, its rotation cracking the air. While swinging it, he shouted with mocking impatience. Hulk! I know you're awake, get up already. With a final heave, he hurled the sphere at Magneto's face. The projectile tore through the air so fast that friction set its entire surface ablaze, glowing crimson like a falling star. It streaked across the battlefield in a fiery arc, hurtling straight toward Magneto, as if to shatter the world itself. Fool! All brawn, no brain. Magneto extended one hand calmly. A tidal wave of magnetic force surged outward, enveloping the blazing sphere. In an instant, its terrifying momentum bled away. And when it came within a single meter of Magneto, the projectile froze in place, unable to advance another inch. Such was the overwhelming dominion of the master of magnetism. But before anyone could draw breath in relief, a faint, beast-like growl seeped through the sphere's tiny cracks. Magneto's expression shifted. A split second later. Boom! The iron sphere exploded outward like a fragmentation bomb. Hulk! Shrapnel blasted in all directions, shredding everything within 100 meters. Friend and foe alike were ripped apart like targets hit by a point-blank shotgun. Only Magneto reacted in time, suspending the deadly fragments mid-air. But the Hulk's punch followed immediately. A green comet of rage bursting through the haze, too fast for Magneto to form another cage. All he could do was gather nearby metal into a smaller defensive sphere around himself. Crack! The Hulk's fist struck with an earth-shattering impact. The metal sphere was launched hundreds of meters away, smashing straight through the recently repaired Academy building. The elegant English manor, restored with painstaking effort, collapsed in a roar of rubble and dust, burying Magneto beneath tons of stone and steel. On the battlefield, despair rippled through the ranks of the mutants. If even Magneto had fallen, who could possibly stand against these two monstrous Hulks? Yet, a tremor rippled through the ruins. Massive beams and concrete slabs lifted into the sky, suspended by an invisible force. No one who dared oppose Magneto would be allowed even a moment of peace. In seconds, the darkened sky was blotted out by a mass of levitating metal. Even the helicarrier, brought by Captain America, shuddered as Magneto's power dragged it toward his domain of steel. With regal indifference, Magneto rose atop the spiraling storm of metal debris, glaring down at the two Hulks. It's been many years since I've used my full strength. Perhaps you've forgotten what it feels like. Tank shells, helicopter frames, rifles, bullets, steel beams. Every piece of metal on the battlefield tore free and spiraled upward. A colossal vortex formed. A storm of iron more terrifying than any Category 12 typhoon. If Magneto brought his hand down, the battlefield would be reduced to carnage in an instant. Even so, such a display of power drained his aging body sharply. But with the situation as dire as it was, he had no choice. Yet Magneto failed to notice. His psychic shielding helmet had been knocked loose during Hulk's earlier strike. And the moment it fell, a vast, immeasurable mental force washed into his mind. His raised hand froze in place. Time itself seemed to halt. Bullets suspended mid-air like specks of dust in a photograph. Even the roaring metal vortex stilled. Only Magneto's thoughts continued to move. He recognized this ability instantly. Only a handful on Earth could command such psychic might. Charles. Magneto murmured. I was told you were dead. If he'd known otherwise, his first move today would have been retrieving his helmet. Not charging headfirst toward two Hulks. A wheelchair rolled silently across the suspended mental plane. Professor Charles Xavier emerged from behind Magneto, wearing the same gentle expression he always had. In a manner of speaking, I did die, Xavier said softly. I'm using the body of my twin brother. He has been in a vegetative state since birth. It was the post-credit revelation from X-Men Origins, Wolverine. Charles Xavier's consciousness had survived by transferring into his comatose twin brother. The very reason Marcus had instructed Tony to search U.S. birth records for twins named Xavier. Magneto let out a bitter laugh. If I knew you were still alive, Charles, I would have killed you first today. But now, I suppose I'm nothing more than a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. So what do you want? My head is a peace offering to the government. Xavier shook his head. Eric. I want to know how you convinced Cyclops to shake your hand. He rested back in his chair. He would never violate a mind without consent, even that of his oldest rival. Magneto smirked. You want answers? Then look. Everything you seek is in my memory. Very well. As you wish. Xavier touched 2 fingers to his temple. Their eyes met. And he plunged directly into Magneto's memories. Chapter 216, Chapter 215, Magneto's Reason. 887 words. 4 days earlier. Before Captain America assumed the presidency, the U.S. government had issued a harsh directive demanding that all mutants, including the X-Men students, immediately enroll in the pre-amendment version of the Superhero Registration Act, serving the government as state employees. When the X-Men refused, they were swiftly scapegoated as one of the causes of the New York War. Public hostility surged. Discrimination intensified. Mutants became targets once more. Using this as an opening, Magneto arrived at the Xavier Institute. He requested a formal discussion with Cyclops about the future of mutant kind. Most X-Men instantly opposed the idea. Only Cyclops, painfully aware of how dire the situation had become, agreed to hear Magneto out. X-Men, Magneto addressed the room full of young mutants. Look at our situation. If you could take your eyes off Charles for even a moment, you would see clearly, I am the only one who can save our species. His words were passionate rather than threatening. Even those who despised him knew he spoke out of genuine fear for mutant survival, not personal gain. But despite Xavier's death, few dared challenge Magneto's ideology. As leader, Cyclops stepped forward. I understand your power could create a prosperous mutant world, he said calmly. But it wouldn't last. When you die, what happens then? We cannot rely on brute force to make humans submit. That isn't Charles's dream. Magneto cut him off sharply. Damn it, you are the ones meant to inherit my role. Why else do you think I let you children live all these years? The blunt honesty struck Cyclops harder than any attack. Only now did he finally understand something that had been right before him for years. There had never been just one mentor. Xavier had been the gentle father who taught through words. Magneto had been the harsh master who taught through action. 2 halves of a single philosophy, peace and resistance, balancing each other for the sake of mutant kind. Cyclops finally realized that Magneto, in his own severe way, had invested his life into guiding them just as deeply as Charles had. Yet even so, Cyclops could not accept Magneto's extremist ideals. I will never stand by your plan to destroy humanity, Cyclops answered. The X-Men pursue coexistence, not domination. I don't ask you to commit genocide, Magneto replied coldly. If I believed I could wipe out humanity once and for all, I wouldn't need successors. His voice softened, just barely. And I'd also suggest you stop using the word peace. Only the defeated seek peace. If you want a mutant utopia, then hear me well, the road forward will involve conflict with humanity. Cyclops remained silent. Only now did he grasp the truth. He had never fully understood the men before him. But the message was clear. Magneto had no interest in usurping the X-Men. He wanted to preserve the Academy, the last sanctuary of their species. I understand, Cyclops finally said. He extended his hand. Magneto accepted it. And so in that moment, the X-Men were reborn under a shared philosophy. Not Xavier's or Magneto's alone, but something forged between them. Return to the present, inside the psychic world. Professor Xavier opened his eyes in the frozen mental landscape. He faced the immobilized Magneto and spoke quietly. Eric. I never imagined this. But I remain certain I was not wrong. Yes, Magneto replied. You were not wrong, just incomplete. His voice trembled with sincerity, rare for the master of magnetism. That is why I never tried to kill you before the children were ready. But now. Charles, you must let them walk their own path. Not now, Xavier answered firmly, more resolute than he had been in years. He swept his arms outward, revealing the battlefield below. The chaos, the bloodshed, the terror frozen on the faces of young mutants. Mutants must not become the enemies of Captain America. If they take this path, they turn their backs on justice. Magneto's voice grew sharp. And what then? Should mutant destiny be placed in the hands of a human? Steve Rogers may be a great leader, but what about his successor? What about the next president, someone we cannot influence at all? He raised his voice in a thunderous declaration. Today, here and now, mutants must claim their own fate. A slow clap broke the tension. Both men turned. A striking woman stepped forward, her entire body a flawless crystalline diamond. It was Emma Frost, the White Queen. Once imprisoned and experimented upon for being a mutant. Once a member of Magneto's Brotherhood. Now an X-Man in her own right. Her diamond form glimmered as she walked deeper into the psychic realm. Emma. Xavier breathed, surprised but composed. It's been a long time since we've crossed paths like this. He issued a warning. You know your psychic power cannot override mine. You cannot disrupt my control over Eric. Xavier was near Omega level, one step from the absolute peak. Emma Frost, an alpha-level telepath, was far below him in raw power. Emma smiled knowingly. Oh, I'm fully aware of that. Which is why I didn't come in here alone. __________. T/N. For readers who would like early access, my Patreon is available for just $4 per month. You'll unlock 140+ advanced chapters and help support ongoing works. Link patreon.com/user?u=79514336. You may also search Translator Sama directly on Patreon. Your support is sincerely appreciated. Chapter 217, Chapter 216, Steel Tempest. 844 words. The White Queen, her body gleaming like flawless natural diamond, stepped aside. And from behind her, Jean Grey emerged hesitantly. When she saw Professor Xavier, her eyes widened with a mixture of shock and relief. Placing a trembling hand over her chest, Jean whispered. Professor. I'm so glad you're alive. I truly believed you were gone forever. Why? Why didn't you come back to us sooner? If you had, Cyclops wouldn't have been forced to make such painful choices. Professor Xavier regarded the student he was most proud of. And understood immediately why she had entered this psychic realm. Gently, he explained. I'm sorry, Jean. When I awakened, the school had already been attacked by the helicarrier. When I learned you all had allied with Eric, I knew that if he realized I was still alive, he would do everything within his power to destroy me. Without your help, I am far too vulnerable to stand before him. Magneto snorted, though his tone carried a reluctant acknowledgement. Smart. I wouldn't have let such a perfect opportunity slip. Xavier continued. So I turned to Captain America and asked him to protect my secret, for if any of my old enemies learned I lived, the consequences would be dire. I believed that staying close to Steve would eventually give me a chance to reach you. And today, that chance finally came, even if our reunion happens under the worst possible circumstances. Xavier's heart ached. Under Marcus's manipulation, the X-Men and Avengers had descended into conflict. And none suffered more than Xavier himself, the founder of the X-Men. Forced to watch his children fight the allies he once trusted. Waking too late, and with the student's mind subtly steered by Marcus, Xavier found his influence shattered. The young mutants no longer revered him as their pillar. Trying to halt this war through moral authority was now impossible. Thus he too had been forced to choose a side. And he chose the one that, in his view, could preserve mutantkin's future. He sided with Captain America. Xavier believed that if mutants lost here, he could still negotiate their survival. But if they won, then they would be locked forever into bloody conflict with humanity. A future utterly incompatible with his dream of coexistence. His students, however, shaped by Marcus's ideology, had embraced rebellion with fervor. For them, dying on their feet was preferable to living under oppression. Xavier looked at Jean with gentle sorrow. Jean clutched her hands tightly. Her voice trembled. "Professor, can't you come back to us?" He smiled, warm as ever. "Jean, you've always understood me best. You know I'm doing this for your sake." Jean inhaled sharply, then exhaled, defeated. Her fist loosened. Finally, she raised her hand. "I'm sorry. I've made my choice." White Queen and Jean extended their arms together. The psychic assault hit like a hurricane. An invisible force powerful enough to tear the mental world apart. Xavier's suit shredded into tatters. His body lifted from the wheelchair, suspended as if tied to an invisible post. Under the combined assault of Jean, Emma Frost, and Magneto's mental domain, even Xavier's near-omega telepathy could no longer resist. Piece by piece, his form disintegrated. A cloud of psychic dust blown away into nothingness. Just before he was expelled from Magneto's mind entirely, he left Jean one final, bittersweet message. "Jean, you've grown up." With Xavier's presence erased, Magneto's consciousness snapped back into his own body. And then, time resumed. Above the Xavier Institute, the steel maelstrom he commanded had already formed. A black vortex churned in the sky, so dense with metal shards that it blotted out the sun. Clouds were dragged helplessly into its rotation, and sunlight turned sickly, drowned in swirling dust and steel. Avengers and soldiers alike felt terror coil in their lungs. This was Magneto at full power. Even worn by age, the might of the master of magnetism remained apocalyptic. With a cold sweep of his arm, the metal storm descended as a rain of blades. Anything human was shredded in less than a second. Bodies carved into unrecognizable pieces. Dust and blood rising together into the storm. Even the two Gamma Giants, Hulk and Red Hulk, found themselves overwhelmed. Their legendary durability buckled under thousands of cuts per second. What no weapon could pierce, sheer volume could. Green and crimson blood sprayed upward, mixing into the storm of metal and earth. Magneto's single strike cleared the battlefield. Nearly the entire U.S. force was torn apart. The black storm slowly turned red. A literal storm of blood and iron. Only those who had fled into the mansion earlier. The mutant students were spared. Inside, the White Queen and Jean collapsed against a wall, drenched in sweat. Driving Xavier from Magneto's mind had drained them nearly to the point of collapse. On the rooftop, unnoticed by all, Marcus lounged comfortably, admiring the chaos he had orchestrated. A figure approached him quietly. A man in a dark suit. It was Tony Stark. Freshly missing, as Ross had just informed Captain America. And now silently standing beside Marcus. Chapter 218, Chapter 217, The Immortal Hulk. 825 words. "Morning, Tony," Marcus greeted casually as the Iron Man armor settled beside him. At his fingertips rested Loki's scepter, its Mind Stone glowing faintly. With its psychic distortion field active, their conversation was sealed off even from telepaths. Tony stared at the battlefield below, where Magneto's steel tempest raged and the X-Men cheered in triumph. "This is what you wanted?" he asked, voice low. Watching them tear each other apart. Marcus shrugged with disarming honesty. "There's no helping it. These people are far too powerful." And he wasn't wrong. On the battlefield were Hulk, Magneto, the Phoenix, Professor X. All titans whose strength bordered on myth. In Marcus's own forces, only the Scarlet Witch and Marcus himself could be considered top-tier, barely alpha-level. To confront several alpha-high or near-omega mutants head-on, beings capable of planetary destruction, was sheer lunacy. But now, thanks to the seamless cooperation between Marcus and Tony, These titans were too busy tearing each other apart over principles to notice Marcus at all. Whether mutant or Avenger, they would fight until one side was dead. And in the chaos, half, if not more, of Marcus's greatest obstacles would erase themselves. For now, Marcus's metallization powers were useless. Magneto suppressed the entire battlefield. But once both sides were exhausted and crippled, who would be left to stop him from claiming everything? Marcus asked. Our forces are fully in position. Tony nodded. All your troops have been moved through the tunnel network. One word from you and the dead flood will swallow this place. Not yet. Marcus kept his eyes on the carnage below. We haven't seen either side's trump cards. I'd rather not make too dramatic an entrance. Tony accepted that with a silent nod. Then he handed Marcus a black shield security card marked with a level 5 clearance sigil. The one they had taken off Nick Fury. The details of Project Blacklight are all here. Their research just had a major breakthrough. They're announcing that their synthetic blacklight organisms can now be perfectly controlled, they're combat ready. The key came from data recovered at Hydra's Sokovia facility, the zombie control headset you asked me to develop earlier. You planned for this day even back then, didn't you? Marcus smirked. Pure coincidence. I never expected such a tiny zombie control device to cause such a large ripple effect. If the Blacklight researchers knew how that helicarrier really fell in the New York War, they would never have dared combine zombies with a control system. Tony stiffened. They're close. I can sense their signals. Marcus's expression sharpened, cold, calculating. Even without the Blacklight virus itself. Project Blacklight now belonged entirely to him. Then let's see, Marcus said softly. What kind of monsters the government has cooked up? As Marcus finished speaking, Magneto's colossal storm finally calmed. The courtyard of Xavier's school had transformed into a gruesome scrapyard. Reeking of iron and blood. Here scrap meant limbs, corpses, and twisted metal. Thousands of tons of blood-soaked steel carpeted the grounds. Beneath them were untold numbers of crushed soldiers. For the moment, no one dared challenge the master of magnetism. Magneto descended slowly, and as soon as his boots touched the ground he stumbled. X-Men rushed to support their savior, only to discover his abdomen soaked in red. It was the injury he'd received during the dual assault by the Hulks. When Hulk exploded out of the metal sphere, a shard had pierced Magneto's torso. The follow-up punch nearly tore him apart. Had Magneto not caught himself mid-flight with magnetic force, he would have been launched straight into orbit. He was over 70. A lifetime of battle had aged his body faster than normal. That he remained standing at all was thanks only to his iron will. You need medical treatment immediately. Kitty Pryde exclaimed. A combination of lacerations and internal rupture. Any other man would be unconscious or dead. No. The mutants still need me, Magneto insisted. He stood only by magnetically bracing the metal around him. The fact that he had landed meant he could no longer sustain flight. You're dying. Kitty shouted. Even if we take you now, there may not be time. I know, but I cannot leave yet. Magneto forced himself forward, eyes fixed on the battlefield. Blood dripped from his lips. The enemy hasn't fallen. So neither can I. Hyuk. The roar shook the air. A massive green form erupted from beneath the rubble, arms raised in fury. Hulk was covered in deep, bone-revealing wounds. But unlike Magneto, his monstrous body stitched itself back together in seconds. Now restored and enraged beyond reason, he charged the mutants with thunderous steps. Red Hulk rose as well, only to be smashed back into the ground by Hulk's savage punch. There was no ally or foe anymore, only targets. This was the Hulk in his pure, unrestrained fury. The same state in which he had killed Abomination. With unlimited anger came unlimited strength. Given time, that strength would grow without limit, until nothing living could stand in his path. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.